So today's episode is going to be another Hollywood murder mystery. This one is on a sitcom actor Bob Crane. He was best known for his role in a 1960s TV show called Hogan's Heroes. It remained in syndication after it originally aired, so people were familiar with this person and his image for several years afterwards. And because it was a family-oriented, kind of well-loved TV show, people had fond memories of him and I guess trusted him and liked him. Bob Crane, however, had a second life that he was also living, so he had this kind of squeaky clean image publicly because of this particular character that he was playing. And on the other hand, he was, a bit of a voyeur. He liked to videotape his various sexual exploits, and also he had a very large collection of nude photography, usually of the women, I guess, that he was dating or involved with. It's unclear how he was procuring all of these females. A lot of times in the anecdotal information about him and his friends, he would lure them in really with just his star status, even though he wasn't really working in TV anymore. But for up-and-coming wannabe actresses, he could kind of get them to do a certain amount of activities for him, and he would film them or videotape or take photographs or whatever. And so he had this very extensive collection of films. A lot of times it was films including himself, and this was just this side story that was going on with him. But every now and then people would find out. Many times they knew and were aware of this and were fine with it, but every now and then he was also filming people without their knowledge, and when they would find out that particular activity, he created a lot of enemies for himself. Not only was it a situation where the females involved, but sometimes they were married or had boyfriends, and then those guys would get involved. So he had a lot going on behind the scenes. By the time it was the late 70s, in 1978, he was working a dinner theater type scene in Phoenix, Arizona. So he was outside of the Hollywood system. He was still working, but this was definitely a step lower than what he had been used to. He never really did anything beyond that main sitcom, and he was just sort of continuing to gain whatever favors he was able to based on that particular fame that he had from that sitcom. And like I said, it was in syndication, so people continued to be aware of him, so he was able to do that even though it was maybe 15 years later or something like that. But anyway, this story is considered unsolved because the person that they accused of doing the crime was eventually acquitted, and so nobody really knows what happened to Bob Crane. So let's get into the story the way that it begins. This is from the Phoenix New Times newspaper, I guess. The way that it begins is in regards to an Australian actress who I guess was, kind of intrigued with Bob Crane. She was working in the play that he was involved with at the time in Phoenix, and it's unclear what his motivations were with her. On one hand, publicly, it seemed like he was trying to get her to come to his apartment to help her with acting lessons. He wanted to film her according to various people's statements and then critique her acting. Other people said this was code for for some sort of sexual encounter that he was planning with her, but Barry admitted that she had already been involved with Crane on more than one occasion. So, so maybe this was just for acting. It's unclear, but in any case, Barry was supposed to meet Bob Crane that evening and then the following morning. So we start a little bit into this article, but here we go. Barry says her manager and future husband, Alan Wells, had introduced her to the star of Hogan's Heroes years earlier. A former actor himself, he had a bit part in the original Cape Fear. Wells had at one time owned a Los Angeles strip club, the Classic Cat, a favored Crane haunt. On the evening of June 28, 1978, Barry sat in the Windmill Dinner Theater audience with John Carpenter during the long stretches of beginner's luck that she wasn't on stage. She knew the black-haired man as Bob Crane's best friend, a pleasant guy from California. After the show, Barry saw the two friends walking together to Crane's car. Crane hollered at her not to forget their appointment the following day. So, this other person that she was sitting with, this person, John Carpenter, is an important character. He's the person that the police and everyone has been looking at really for the last however many years as the primary suspect. It's not really clear what the relationship was between John Carpenter and Bob Crane. They met at some point in California. They became friends. They seemed to be part of that kind of late 60s and 70s kind of swinger scene, even though John Carpenter was not directly involved with that. But I think he was sort of enamored with Bob Crane, and Crane wanted to have like a sidekick with him who was not going to overpower his presence. But, it gave him a little bit of a backup in a sense that he didn't feel he was just prowling around for women on his own. So he would sort of go to these bars and clubs with this guy. And at that time, he would say that John Carpenter was his manager, or just make something up. And then, whatever ladies they were able to kind of get, interested in them, Bob Crane would apparently take the prettiest one, or the one that he felt was the prettiest, and then John Carpenter would get whomever else. And this was like their little thing that they were doing for the last 10-15 years. And, it's not totally clear why they continued to persist, because Bob Crane didn't need John Carpenter to be there, but for some reason it gave him some kind of solace to have this person there. And they had a strange kind of a relationship. They were friends, but it seemed like Carpenter was benefiting, but on the other hand, Bob Crane kept bringing him into his life too. So it's not clear what was going on between these two. Maybe they were just friends, and Carpenter was his wingman, which is essentially how Carpenter explained the situation, that he benefited from this interaction because he was able to get dates basically pretty easily because of Crane's status. His fame or whatever is helpful in terms of John Carpenter's situation, because he was kind of a shy guy, and this was one way that he was able to get some dates out of the whatever interactions they were having. So it's unclear if that's all that was going on, but it seems like, according to them, that this is what was basically happening. Okay, let's see the next one. Okay, so Barry arrived at the Winfield Apartments at 7430 East Chaparral in Scottsdale at about 2 in the next afternoon to meet with Crane. A police report about her presence there includes the line her business there was to videotape an Carpenter, but it had been somewhat more than that. She later volunteered to detectives that she'd slept with Crane twice. Bob Crane's propensity for making pornographic videos of his sexual exploits might lead one to assume that what act the police reports were referring to. They thought that Barry was basically going to film, some scene for Bob Crane, and it's unclear if that was what was going to happen or not. But, she was apparently dating her future husband, Alan Wells, and he was at this particular event too. So, this was like a weird time in the 70s where everyone was sort of involved with each other in a light way, and I guess nobody was taking these encounters seriously. But according to her, and even according to Alan Wells, she was actually going to do some monologues for Crane, and then he was going to critique them because Barry had been trying to break into the Hollywood system for, I guess, the last 10 years, but was unable to do it. And so, it's kind of strange that she would think Crane, who was actually not part of the Hollywood system anymore, would be able to help her in any capacity. But, one person might have had one motivation in going, the other might have had another, so who knows what was actually going to get out. It never happened, though. That meeting never occurred. So a Scottsdale police transcript shows Barry told detectives that she had gone to Crane's apartment not for sex, but to dub a new voice track over a scene from the play. June 29th, 1978 was a steamy early summer day in the valley, 106 degrees at its hottest. Barry was wearing short shorts and a t-shirt. She knocked on the door of apartment 132A, but Crane didn't answer. She tried the door and found it unlocked. She stepped into the two-bedroom apartment and called out Crane's name. No answer. The place was dark. Thinking Crane might be by the swimming pool, Barry pulled back a closed curtain to look through a sliding glass door. Still no luck. She walked slowly into Crane's bedroom. In interviews with police and New Times, Barry described what she saw in bed. At first, I thought it was a girl with long dark hair because of all the blood. It had turned real dark. I thought, oh, Bob's got a girl here. Now, where's Bob? I thought. Well, she's done something to herself. Bob has gone to get help. At that time, I recognized blood. It was like a strange feeling. Barry decided to take a closer look at what was in the bed. She had started to realize it was a man. My first instincts were, I don't know why, but I thought it was John Carpenter. And the whole wall was covered one end to the other with blood, and I just sort of stood there and I was numb. He was curled up in a fetus position on his side, and he had a cord tied around his neck in a bow. Barry ran out of the apartment for help. Paulette Gazzetia was the first Scottsdale police officer to arrive and secure the crime scene. Oddly, Gazzetia is now an investigator for the Public Defender's Office and is working on behalf of murder defendant John Carpenter. Scottsdale Police Lieutenant Ron Dean arrived at about 3 p.m. and took over. No one was yet certain whose body was in the bed. Victoria Barry was in the kitchen, writing out a statement for police at 3:15 p.m. when the telephone in the apartment rang. Dean instructed her to answer it, but not to say a word about the murder victim in the other room. The caller was John Carpenter, who told Barry he was back in Los Angeles. In a November 1990 interview with police, Barry said Carpenter had sounded strange during their short conversation, but more recently she put a less sinister spin on it. It was pleasant and there was nothing really predominant, she testified at a hearing to determine if Carpenter should stand trial for murdering Crane. Do you recall describing John Carpenter's phone call as being strange? Prodded Lieutenant Parker. Vaguely, Barry replied. Lieutenant Ron Dean took the telephone from Barry, and he says he identified himself as a police officer investigating an incident at the Crane apartment. Carpenter told him he'd been out with the actor until about 1 a.m., a time he would revise the next morning to 2:45 a.m. He said he'd found his own way back to the airport later that morning for his flight home. The telephone rang again soon after. Carpenter hung up. It was one of Crane's many female friends from Phoenix. John Carpenter, right after getting off the phone with Dean, called his son, Bob Crane Jr., but he was vague as far as what had happened, because when he called the first time to the apartment, he asked, what happened? Was there a robbery? And Dean didn't specify what the incident that they were investigating at the apartment was. So when Carpenter called his son, Bob Crane's son, he didn't know what to make of it either, so he got worried, and then, talked to Dean afterwards. Dean said it troubled him that Carpenter didn't ask him what kind of crime had been committed or where Bob Crane was. Well, Dean, did later admit that Carpenter asked him, was there a robbery? So, as far as Carpenter was concerned, from just that statement, he thought, Bob Crane was fine and that they were investigating a robbery. Now, on the other end, a person can say, well, he knew he was dead, so that's why he's not asking about, is Bob Crane all right? Because even if there was a robbery, the next question might be, where's Bob? Why isn't he talking? Why was the woman Barry talking to him and then the police officer? That is a little weird that he wouldn't question where Bob was. That probably would be the first, thing to ask. But in any case, the reason he didn't ask me was that he already knew what had happened. Dean tells New Times the killer himself had returned to the scene of the crime by phone. Carpenter's version, of course, is a little different than Dean's. I asked him what was going on. Carpenter tells New Times, he said, we have a situation here. I said, what? A robbery? He wouldn't tell me. That's why I called Bob Crane Jr. I was very worried. So, yeah, I guess to his satisfaction, he didn't feel that there was anything more severe going on. I still feel like if you're calling your friend's apartment and somebody else is answering, this other woman who was just a very random kind of friend. She was working with him, but it was still a situation where I think you would question where's Bob? Why can't he talk? But Carpenter didn't push the police. Word of Bob Crane's murder swept across the valley, the nation, the world. It was easily the biggest crime in the history of Scottsdale, years away from becoming today's booming tourist mecca of 140,000. The Scottsdale Police Department in 1978 was a typical small city agency. It didn't have a homicide unit. There weren't enough murders to merit one, and its officers did a little of everything. That lack of speculation shaped how the department mobilized for its highest profile case ever. Led by Chief Case Officer Dennis Borgenhagen and his superior Lieutenant Ron Dean, Scottsdale began to investigate this investigation by the book. They searched the crime scene in an effort to learn how and why a killer had struck. What the motive was far easier for investigators to determine. Nothing of financial value seemed to be missing from Crane's apartment. That eliminated robbery. There were no signs of a struggle, and a post-mortem examination indicated Crane had been asleep when someone bludgeoned him in the left temple with a blunt instrument. The detectives found bloodstains on the inside of the front door and surmised that the killer had fled in that direction. There were no signs of forced entry, and the sliding glass door that led to the swimming pool was unlocked. Victoria Berry said she hadn't touched the door, and detectives such as a golf club or a tire iron, capable of inflicting a swift and fatal blow. Investigators quickly interviewed many of Crane's friends and colleagues, and they learned that amiable, popular 49-year-old Bob Crane had left behind many people who detested him. A partial list included his estranged second wife Patty, with whom Crane had feuded in a loud and bitter telephone conversation overheard by his neighbors and by John Carpenter hours before Crane's death. A fellow actor who had sworn vengeance after a violent argument with Crane in Texas a few months before the murder. The many husbands and boyfriends of whom Crane had sexually seduced. An example, the ex-boyfriend of a woman Crane had slept with in Scottsdale taped a mutilated newspaper photograph of Crane to her back door after the man learned of their relationship. Some of those women were among literally hundreds who had posed nude for Crane and his ever-present Polaroid camera. Many others consented to having their lovemaking with Crane videotaped. Some, however, had no idea Crane had recorded his sex sessions with them until after he died and the Scottsdale police informed them. The detectives confiscated Crane's videotapes during their first search of his apartment. In the rear bathroom, they also found a mini dark room with negatives of nude women awaiting development in a tray. A photo enlarger sat on the back of the toilet. Some of the videotapes were as quirky as they were kinky. Crane would spend hours upon hours editing footage of himself in sexual union with one or more women. Often he would painstakingly splice in strangely innocuous scenes from sitcoms and talk shows of the day. One tape starts with Crane having sex with a woman. The scene then suddenly shifts to an interview of the actor on Open House, a Phoenix talk show, then returns to the homemade porn. Crane again cuts in towards the end with a scene from the Andy Griffith Show. The tapes fascinated the Scottsdale cops, but the lead investigators were more interested in learning about the relationship between Crane and his friend John Carpenter. Many people they interviewed said the two were buddies. He said they seemed to get along famously, even during Carpenter's trip to Arizona. But a waitress at Bobby McKee's restaurant said the two men had seemed tense with each other 2 nights before the murder. Another woman told police Carpenter had pouted when Crane didn't pay attention to him. Yet a third woman said Crane told her he and Carpenter weren't getting along as well as they had in the past. The latter was corroborated by Bob Crane Jr., who told police there was an indication before Phoenix, just in a passing conversation with my father, that Carpenter coming into town was getting to be just a bit of a pain in the ass. My dad expressed that he just didn't need Carpenter's kind of company anymore. Bob Crane Jr. also raised a possibility of a bisexual gone mad scenario. He said his dad had told him several years earlier that Carpenter had admitted to at least one homosexual experience. Carpenter denies this. For all I know, he could have been in love with my father, Crane Jr. said, but evidence of true animosity between Carpenter and Crane was scarce. A transcript of the police interview with the Bobby McKee's waitress, for example, reveals that Scottsdale's detectives fed the word tense to her, so she didn't originally use that word. Carpenter looked like he was kind of upset. Waitress Linda Robertson told them, "How would you describe it? As tense?" Towards each other, an investigator asked her. "Yes, tense is a good word," she replied, "'cause it wasn't a loud fight. It was nothing other people noticed." That was true enough. A bartender at the restaurant told detectives Crane had acted very nice towards Carpenter and did not seem upset, nor did the bartender have anything negative to say about Carpenter's behavior. Physical evidence against Carpenter also was hard to come by. Investigators became excited when a maid at the Sunburst Hotel, where he had been staying, said closes, she again repeated the information about the bloody washcloth and pillowcase, but she came up with the date of June 24th, 4 days before the Crane killing. Though Carpenter's motive remained elusive, investigators soon found solid proof of his opportunity to commit the murder. Their interest in Carpenter turned to obsession on the afternoon of June 30th, a little more than a day after Carpenter returned home to Los Angeles. That afternoon, Scottsdale police located the car Carpenter had rented for part of his 4-day stay in Phoenix. Carpenter had checked in the car, a 1978 Chrysler Cordoba, at an Avis counter inside the Sunburst Hotel. Avis had sent the car to a Phoenix dealership, Lanker Chrysler Plymouth, for repairs after Carpenter complained about its faulty electrical system. The car had broken down on its way to the shop and had to be towed in. At Lanker, Scottsdale detective Darren Berry noticed what appeared to be a small amount of dried blood on the car's interior passenger side. He called his supervisor, Lieutenant Ron Dean. Dean arranged for a tow truck to take the car to the State Department of Public Safety compound in Phoenix for a scientific examination. What happened at the DPS compound will be devastating to the chances for a successful prosecution of John Carpenter. Much of what occurred there remains the subject of buck passing and finger pointing, and may help acquit Carpenter. Even in 1978, the best evidence against Carpenter was weak. DPS criminologist Bruce Bergstrom determined the blood on Carpenter's passenger door was type B, the same type as Crane's, found in only about 1 out of 7 people. No one else whom police knew to have been in the car, including Carpenter, tested for that type. DPS, however, couldn't prove the blood in the car was Crane's, just that it was his type. Though they weren't at all sure why he would have killed his friend, the Scottsdale police had found their number 1 suspect, John Carpenter. If John Carpenter killed Bob Crane, his behavior in the days after the murder proves he's a gutsy son of a gun. He voluntarily returned from California to Arizona with police after they had told him he was their chief suspect. He volunteered to take a lie detector test. He volunteered to take sodium pentothal, better known as truth serum, to be hypnotized. Anything. He told Scottsdale investigators to help them find his friend's killer. He didn't contact an attorney. Carpenter's story has remained essentially the same from the first time he spoke to police until his exclusive series of interviews with the Phoenix New Times. Together with police reports and interviews with other key players, Carpenter's account goes like this. He flew to Phoenix on June 25th to spend 4 days with Crane to conduct a little business for the Akai Corporation. Carpenter would often visit his friend of more than a decade on the road. Women were drawn to the still popular Crane like fish to a worm, and Carpenter didn't seem to mind dallying with the leftovers. Crane picked up Carpenter that day at Sky Harbor Airport. On their way to Scottsdale, Carpenter says the actor showed him a personal photo album of numerous naked women, including some he had met during his stint at the Windmill Dinner Theater. Carpenter then checked in at the Sunburst a few blocks from Crane's apartment. The new additions to the photo album portended a wild time in the valley, just what Carpenter was seeking. The 2 cohorts did their usual bar and disco hopping after Crane finished with his evening performances of Beginner's Luck. Though Carpenter didn't drink and Crane drank only rarely, the valley's night spots were the best places to meet potential new scores. Though Carpenter failed on his trip, Crane scored big. Police reports indicate he had sex on the afternoon of his murder with a 29-year-old woman he'd met a few weeks earlier. After the show, the evening of June 28th, Carpenter last scheduled Crane's car to Bogart's, a bustling Phoenix disco. The pair met two sisters at the disco, Carol and Christy Newell. Crane introduced Carpenter as his manager, a typical ploy to impress possible scores, but Crane wasn't much interested in the Newell sisters. From Bogart's, he telephoned Caroline Barr, a restaurant hostess supervisor he had met during his stay in the Valley. Crane asked Barr to join the men for an early morning breakfast at the Safari coffee shop in Scottsdale. She said she'd meet them there. Carol Newell's sister was out of the picture, but by now Carol agreed to come along as well. The three drove to Scottsdale in Crane's car. On the way to the restaurant, Carpenter grabbed the keys to his rental car from his hotel room. Carpenter and Newell then drove in his car to the Safari, followed shortly by Crane. Carol and Barr showed up right after Crane. By all accounts, the conversation at the Safari was friendly but uneventful. The quartet broke up at about 2 a.m. Newell walked out with Carpenter as some fans of Crane chatted with him and Barr for a few moments. Barr says Crane shouted ahead to Carpenter, "Where are you going?" She says Carpenter replied either, "I will see you later," or "I will see you tomorrow." Caroline Barr declined Crane's offer to come over to his apartment. She drove herself home after making plans to meet him for lunch the next day. Carpenter was hoping he had finally hit the jackpot on his last night in the Valley. The Newell's first interview with police, she said Carpenter had simply dropped her off at her home at about 5 minutes after, that was about 5 minutes from the restaurant. From the start, Carpenter had recalled it quite differently. He says he convinced Newell to come into his hotel room at the Sunburst. There, Carpenter says, I put some moves on, but she didn't go for it, so I stopped and drove her home. That's more in line with what Newell said later. That's more in line with what Newell's statements were to the police and her recent testimony at Carpenter's preliminary hearing. He tried to encourage me to stay, she told investigators in 1990. He laid down on top of me while my back was on the bed and kissed me. I remember thinking, how am I going to get out of this? I kept saying, I gotta go, I gotta go. Carpenter took Newell home about 3 a.m. That put him in the 5-hour window of opportunity to kill Crane, who died between 3 and 8 a.m. According to a coroner's report, probably closer to 3. Carpenter drove Newell home after eliciting a promise from her that she'd awaken Crane the next morning, sometime between 8 and 11 a.m. Though she never did go to Crane's, authorities have intimated Carpenter wanted Newell to find the body of the man he planned to kill, but Carpenter says he had a reason for the request. If she doesn't want me, he says, he thought to himself, maybe she'll want Bob. Prosecutors allege that sometime after he dropped Newell off, Carpenter entered Crane's apartment and bashed the sleeping actor to death, but Carpenter insists he returned to his hotel and called Crane to see how things had fared with Carolyn Bear. Crane, he says, told him he had also struck out. The actor said he was standing in his undershorts editing the swear words out of Saturday Night Fever so his 6-year-old son could watch it. Carpenter says he told Crane he'd find his own transportation to the airport later that morning. The two exchanged pleasantries, Carpenter says, and soon he said goodnight to each other. Records show Carpenter checked out of the Sunburst at 8:24 that morning and turned the Cordoba at the Avis counter and returned the Cordoba at the Avis counter in the hotel, complaining to a clerk that the car had electrical problems. The hotel check-in clerk says Carpenter was pleasant but strange, which is how some describe the man to this day. Carpenter is a nervous type, he says he's mistakenly believed his flight home was at 11 a.m., but then discovered it was an hour earlier. If he was edgy, he said it was about his flight, nothing else. Carpenter briefly tracks his next movements like this. He says he took a cab to Sky Harbor, hopped on his from his wife Diana and was living with 20-year-old Rita Cloutier in Inglewood, California. Rita answered the door at the couple's apartment early in the evening of July 1st, the day after police discovered the blood in Carpenter's rental car. The two men at the door introduced themselves as Ron Dean and Dennis Borgenhagen from the Scottsdale Police Department. They wanted to talk to John. Rita said she didn't know where he was. She said she had expected to be away for the weekend, but had just returned home. She said that he might be at his longtime friend, actor Richard Dawson's house of Hogan's Heroes and Family Feud fame. A spook Carpenter spent time at Dawson's after the murder. Dawson's son, Mark Dawson, then in his late teens, recalls the visits. As far as I can remember, Mark Dawson tells New York Times he was concerned with helping the cops find out who had killed his friend. He wasn't fleeing, just the opposite. My dad had no great love for Bob Crane, but he and John were shocked more than anything else. We really tried not to talk about it much. Before the cops could contact Richard Dawson, Carpenter called home. Dean got online and told Carpenter that he was at his mother's house about 70 miles away. He agreed to drive back away and meet with them. At the apartment, Dean read Carpenter's Miranda rights. He told the investigators to ask whatever they wanted. For the next few hours, Carpenter recounted his visit to the valley. He told the investigators he had kept the Cordoba locked at all times, and that the only people who had been in the car during this stay were Bob Crane and Carol Newell. They broke the news to him about finding the blood in the car. Carpenter had no explanation for it. After the interview, Carpenter went. I know now this was a stupid thing to do. He went back to Phoenix with them because I knew they had me in their sights. Carpenter says that they even told me they thought I was the bad guy. I was nervous, but I didn't have anything to hide. On July the 2nd, Carpenter fled back to Arizona with Dean and Borgenhagen, though he didn't know it at the time. He had a one-way ticket. That spoke volumes about the cops' intentions. That afternoon, Carpenter met at the Scottsdale Police Department with Dean Borgenhagen and Deputy County Attorney Larry Turhoff. Carpenter expressed apprehension at the start of the interview. Since you have implied and directly told me that I had direct contact with Bob Crane's death. But Carpenter again waived his rights to confer with an attorney and agreed to answer any questions. You shook me with the blood on my car, he told them. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how much there was. Then you said to me, why did I kill Bob Crane? I told you right off I didn't, and I would never do that. I'm just not that type of person. Dean again asked him about Crane's album of nude photos he had mentioned in their California interview. Carpenter said he had seen it the day of the murder in Crane's bedroom. This would become important to the investigators. Others they had interviewed had also mentioned the photo album, but the search of Crane's apartment didn't turn it up. The cops concluded Carpenter had taken the photo album from the murder scene and then volunteered the information as a clever diversionary tactic to prove his good faith. Near the end of the July 2nd interview, Carpenter blurted something out of the blue. Yesterday you said something about a polygraph. I could go voluntarily, either a polygraph or a sodium pentothal, and you asked me whatever you want under doctor's conditions or however, either one that you people feel you might get more information out of me. In my opinion, they weren't even close to having enough for us to make a case, recalls Hyder, now an assistant United States attorney. As far as I knew, you had a little blood in a car. They didn't know whose for sure. Motive was lacking, and so was physical evidence. The Scottsdale investigators ignored Carpenter's request for a polygraph or a truth test. Almost 15 years later, Ron Dean has a curious explanation for why he didn't call Carpenter's bluff in 1978. I believe you have to know 2 or 3 things more than the bad guy does, Dean claims, otherwise he'll beat you. He wanted to know a few more things before we put John on the machine. There wasn't enough was hot on his trail, and he knew it. In a tape-recorded telephone conversation with Bob Crane Jr., possibly on July 10th, Carpenter said, "They say there was blood on my car, a very uncommon type. This is bullshit. Boy, they're scratching my back hard, and I'm the one that's trying to help. If your dad had any best friend or whatever you want to call it." "It was you," Crane Jr. interrupted. "I guess they're waiting for you to just break down or something." To this day, Ron Dean says he is sure that Carpenter was ready to confess. "He was trying to tell me something. He did it," Dean says, "but he was playing games. It was Catch Me If You Can. It was almost like he was in a play or something. He puts himself in the third person. He's watched those guys like Dawson and Crane, and he wants to be them. He's a real case." On July 12th, Dean and Borgenhagen popped up unannounced again at Carpenter's Inglewood apartment. He agreed to meet yet again with them a few days later at an Inglewood police substation. The investigators had their last shot at John Carpenter on the evening of July 14th, 1978, but by now the thin wall of civility had marked most of their meetings had cracked. Carpenter finally brought the mutual animus out into the open. "When you sit across from me and accuse me of killing my best friend, one of my best friends," he said. "Well, I'm still thinking that you did," Dean spit back at him. "Then fine, I'm not going to say another word. I'm sorry." "What do you mean you're sorry? You're sorry you killed him, are you? Or do you think he deserved it? Why don't you tell me about that? What happened in Scottsdale, Arizona to cause you to kill Bob Crane? Let's hear it." Carpenter said nothing. Borgenhagen tried a slightly different tact. "You know that at this time we don't have enough evidence to arrest you. But it's getting close, and it's going to happen." Carpenter nodded. "Thank you," he said. "Can I leave now?" "Certainly," the detective replied. Carpenter stepped out of the police station into the cool California night. His home was about 3 miles away. He walked there, he says, in a daze. Almost 14 years later, police arrested him for murder. So, later on, Carpenter was arrested 14 years later on pretty much the exact same evidence that they had. The only difference was they had done an investigation of the blood that was in the car. There was literally like a speck of blood on the car door, the lower part of the car door, so that could have come from somebody's finger or, anybody really. But the issue was that it was blood B, type B, which is a relatively rare type. It only occurs in 1 out of 7 people in the population. Bob Crane was a blood B type, but there was no DNA evidence done at that time. So that was primarily the evidence that they were using to get Carpenter, into this, that they were able to arrest Carpenter under. Later, however, they did do a DNA test, and it turns out that it was not Bob Crane's DNA. It was just somebody else, probably somebody, who had used the car. This was a rental car, who happened to have the same blood type. That was just a bizarre coincidence, but a coincidence that literally landed Carpenter in an extremely hot water. But it was not Bob Crane's DNA, so that was proven, and that's how Carpenter got off, because other than that extra blood, little small sampling in the car, there was nothing linking him. Now, the other weird evidence was that maid, but because her story could not be corroborated or verified, she didn't keep the evidence of this bloody pillowcase that she claims to have seen, and then she had done the hypnosis and so forth. But the evidence about the blood-stained pillowcase actually came from 4 days before Bob Crane's murder. So again, it was maybe a room that she was cleaning where she saw blood, but it doesn't necessarily mean it had anything to do with John Carpenter. It was just another thing that was not working in his favor necessarily, but then on the other hand, they didn't have that physical evidence either. It was tainting the police against him, though. And they were just hell-bent that this was the guy who had done it. Now, they were not looking in the other directions. There were two other directions that I think should have been investigated. The first one, and the most significant one, was his ex-wife Patty. So that afternoon or that evening, before they went out, he had this blowout fight with her on the telephone. She wanted more money, and she was also angry about his various exploits because their relationship was such that she, I guess, still loved Bob Crane, felt betrayed by him, and could not understand his particular sexual interests, and he had, whatever his problems were, he wasn't able to fix them, and he was not willing to go to therapy, and she could not understand why he needed to do this, but this was like, a situation that he had going on that he couldn't stop. So she was actually very angry with him for various reasons. So they have this big fight over the phone. Patty then flies into Arizona, another fact that the police just kind of sidesweep, but this is significant. She flies right into the city the night that he's murdered, and it's very possible that she let herself into the apartment either through the swimming pool door and was waiting for him, or just showed up and stayed at the house, and maybe something transpired. It doesn't seem like that, because if he was killed during his sleep, then probably she was waiting for him, if she's the one who did it. Now, it's really weird about the wire being tied in a bow tie. Again, I don't know that a male would do something like that. For John Carpenter to take a wire, a videotape wire, and tie it, after killing him, then, because the death was caused by the hits, it was not caused by the wire, and then, to afterwards take a wire and then tie it in a bow tie around his neck, that's a very bizarre thing to do. And what would his concern be with the videotape wire? It seems like the videotape wire would be in regards to someone who was upset at someone being videotaped, either themselves being videotaped or just the fact that he was videotaping. And I don't think that Carpenter had that animosity towards him in terms of the videotapes, because he was viewing those tapes. He was fine with it. He was looking at the photographs. He was, getting girls on the side because of these, weird issues that Bob Crane had. So I don't think he had animosity with Crane on that level, but his wife Patty did, and any other woman that he had been involved with who maybe didn't know that she was being videotaped also would have been angry about the thing and being, taped. And then that sort of makes a little more sense why after the killing you would then take the wire that you were recorded with, possibly the hidden wire, and tie it in a bow tie. The bow tie is what's weird. It seems like something a female would do, just because they're used to, tying things in bows. If you gotta have a sash or whatever, then usually you'll tie it in a bow. I don't think a guy would do that. So I just have a feeling this is a female. Who's really angry. Patty is the main one who would seem that she was the most angry, but Bob Crane had just had a sexual encounter with a woman that afternoon. So, it could have even been her come back and found out that, she had been videotaped. There are a lot of possibilities as to what happened, but I think that the police had not investigated Patty properly. I think the fact that she flew into Arizona really needs to be looked at. The other thing is that Patty had Bob Crane's body was buried, I don't know where originally, but she had his body exhumed and reburied in a place in Los Angeles. She changed the photograph to one that showed his Hogan's Heroes character, with the hat and everything. And then she was buried right next to him as his loving wife. This is, again, very strange that, she would want to do something like that, like to take this kind of effort, exhume a body, and then be buried, next to him, and change the photo so as if to erase that part of history, to sort of say that, the divorce and animosity had never happened. She had married this TV character, and he was fine, and they were fine, and now they're going to rest in peace together. It seems like she had more issues with him than the police ever looked into. And I just have a feeling that since she was one of the primary people who was against John Carpenter, she might have had a big motivation in pushing the blame on his side. Again, nobody knows if it was Carpenter or not, but then his behavior is so amazing that he's talking to police, not getting a lawyer, wanting to do sodium pentothal tests and polygraph tests, and they're not wanting to do it. His story doesn't change. He's going out with, ladies just minutes before the supposed murder happens. And it doesn't make sense why he would do that. Why would he first try to make all of these moves in a hotel room with this girl? Okay, it doesn't work out. He then tells the girl to call Bob Crane. I can understand from the police perspective that seems a little strange also, but, he's saying that maybe she might have wanted to get involved with Crane or something, and that was really her only interest in Carpenter. Okay, fine, but then, to drive to Bob Crane's apartment, somehow get into the house because the front door was locked. So it would have been locked at 3-something a.m. And then, decide that he's going to kill the guy. But the phone records show that he did go to his hotel room and call Bob Crane. So, I don't think that after the phone call, he went back, to kill him, but then there's no way to prove it. I guess they don't have cameras in the hotels at that time to say, exactly what time did Carpenter come in and leave, and did he leave again, or anything like that. But he did call him after he dropped the Newell woman at her house. And Crane was video, editing some kind of tape for his kid. That was verified as well. Now, the other thing that's weird is, where's the photo album that everybody has been talking about that they had all seen? It would seem like somebody who had photos in the album would take the album. If you find out that you've been videotaped by somebody, you don't want those videotapes to come out. You're angry about it. And then you do whatever act, and then tie the, videotape wire with a bow. You might also want to steal that photo album, because if your photos are in it, you may want to just take the whole album. Not even thinking straight in terms of just taking the one photo. They'd probably just want to get out of there. I don't think that Carpenter took the album. Where is he going to put it? The police probably would have found it, and why would he take that? He's seen all of these images over the last, 10 or 15 years with Bob Crane. I don't think Carpenter took the album. I think all of these signs point to a woman who is angry, whether it was a new encounter that she had had with Bob Crane, or it was his ex-wife who was just angry that he had this never-ending sexual exploits. This seems like a female was angry with him, because that album was all women's pictures. or it was someone that Crane had been involved with. It could have been a boyfriend of one of those women. And again, they might want to just take the photo album because they don't know if their girlfriend is in that album or something. Could have been something like that. Just also the fact that the way the bludgeoning occurred over his eye might even be a subconscious thing about him constantly viewing these sorts of images. So I just feel it's like a level of animosity that would have to be with someone who felt very betrayed by him, and I just don't feel Carpenter felt that way towards him. I think Carpenter was essentially getting benefits from being his friend, but I just don't think that he killed him. I do think it's very possible the female killed him. I just don't know if it was the ex-wife or these random people that Bob Crane was involved with, because he just, he had not told everybody about this particular habit of his, of videotaping, and the people who would find out were very angry, understandably. Could it have gone so far as, a situation that they would actually resort to killing him? It's possible. I don't know, but I just have a feeling the bow tie was a kind of a touch that came from a female, and also the stealing of the album came from a female, and then the fact that this woman, Patty, wants to sort of erase history and then rebury him next to her, and as if they had never been divorced. It just seems like she might be the one that people need to investigate, especially since she did fly into Phoenix that night after a huge fight with him. But she had not been investigated. Carpenter has been acquitted and is no longer a suspect, although many people think he's still involved. They just can't prove it. So it's a strange case. It's a case where it seems like Bob Crane's, nocturnal habits and activities got the better of him, and he got into a situation where he had upset more people than he could handle, and it's just unclear as to who was so angry to actually resort to something like this. But I do think it was someone who had been hurt by him, or in some capacity, or perceived that they had been hurt by him, and in some capacity betrayed. This was the sort of vengeance that I think had come out, and I just don't feel Carpenter felt that way towards him, even if there was a little bit of tension between the two at the restaurant, or whatever. That could have been about anything. Crane had picked Carpenter up at the airport, and they were friends. He was calling her regularly. I know that on some level the police might take it one way, but on the other hand, it could just be somebody who was just trying to say, hey, I arrived in LA, I'm coming over, or hey, whatever. These kinds of things are also not totally abnormal either. It's just in the light of the events. An investigator might feel like, oh, these are very strange. Why is he calling? Why is he not questioning? Or, a lot of times people don't want to question the police. They get shocked. Why are the police even answering the phone? So it's a strange story, but I just have a feeling Carpenter was not the guilty person in this. And I do think it was somebody else. And I have a feeling it was a female, or possibly even a boyfriend or husband of a female that Carpenter had been, not Carpenter, but that Crane had been involved with. And I still say that people should investigate Patty. Well, she's already passed, but if in some way maybe they can get some information as to what had happened in regards to her, because I just don't think she was investigated properly. Okay, guys, so this was the Bob Crane murder case, and a strange story, a strange life that he led quietly behind the scenes, and kind of an unsolved unsolved case, one of the many unsolved Hollywood cases that we read about. Alright guys, so I will talk to you again next time.